That's right, kids. He's here in the studio with us today. He is Bob Pollock from the Penn State Extension Service. I haven't seen the guy in over a year. Hi.
Good morning. Isn't it wonderful to be back?
Wonderful is one word for it. I can think of others. But we are glad that you're back with us, and welcome back. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Just as I said that, I don't want you to panic here, but I got one of those itchy, I got to sneeze things. And I don't have a shield up here in front of me. But we'll be okay. You can call Bob if you have a question at 349-WCCS or 479-1160 and ask any question that you would like. This weather has certainly been something. It's been a really, really cool start to the month of May. We talked about this last week, what kind of effect it might have on our growing seasons. I guess the chief problem right now is these cold nights.
Sure is. Looks like we're about to turn the page or maybe open a new chapter.
Yeah.
And it didn't get maybe quite as cold last night as they thought it was going to.
Yeah. And that's
so we'll take that. Yep, that's good.
Yeah.
And looking ahead, it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape, 60s and 50s, maybe 40s, and then 70s and 50s, which is a good place to be at this time in May.
Yeah.
And then if we can just keep that going, we'll be in good shape. Maybe we've had our last series of freezes.
Yeah, well, that would be
which would be wonderful.
Thing.
Now we can maybe concentrate on getting plants in the ground and getting that spring process working.
Let me hand you this headset here because you have a caller this morning.
Haven't had to wear that in over a year.
No, I forgot to even get it out for you. But you can put those headsets on. We'll say good morning to our caller. Good morning.
Good morning to you, too. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Good morning. I had a question about when planting gardens. Is there any plants we shouldn't, or stuff we shouldn't plant together?
Oh, you mean like tomatoes next to onions or things like that?
Something like that, something that don't go well together or something do well together.
In the typical garden, it's hard to get distance between plants. Some of the more, of course, the more like plants that you plant, the plants that are related, things in the tomato family, for example, can be susceptible to the same insect and disease pests. But again, in a typical garden of the size we normally have, it's pretty hard to get enough distance between those plants in any case to really limit the potential spread of those things. Now, let's think about big plants, short plants. If we think about sweet corn, for example, they could get 6 feet tall or more, beside cabbage or lettuce. So depending on the orientation of the garden to the sun and how you have that laid out and how you might plant that. So you could get shading effect from some of those taller plants on shorter plants. So how you arrange those can make a bigger difference unless that plant needs a little shade. Sometimes having lettuce and a little bit of partial shade for the day can be beneficial to that and help it keep from wilting from being out in the full sun all day long. So you might purposely try to do some of that.
Generally, an onion isn't going to say to some other plant, "You can't be next to me because I'm taking over this neighborhood."
Yeah, most of those things are. Most of the times when we try to put other plants in, it might be marigolds as an example. You might plant a border of marigolds around plants. Other strategies that people use and can be used on a small scale as well as a larger scale, as we'll kind of call them banker plants. And they do this in the greenhouse, in enclosed structures as well, where you purposely have a plant that's very susceptible to, say, aphids or spider mites or thrips, and you put that plant in there, and that becomes a signal plant, a red flag plant. Because and that's the plant you go to it, so that you don't have to check the entire garden. You can go and check those plants first, and then you can see if you have a problem or not.
Okay.
And then that becomes your monitoring system. All right.
Okay.
Now, and then we have plants that are, again, highly susceptible to certain pests. So sometimes in a field situation, you can plant a border, and then you can striped cucumber beetle, spotted cucumber beetle. Those are highly attractive to cucumbers. So you can plant a row of cucumbers on the border, and then have those attract.
Okay.
And then they've used that to then also limit the amount of insecticide, whatever form that is, whether it be organic or conventional products, and then you can just treat that border crop, and you don't have to treat the whole garden.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
All righty. Anything else?
A lot of times we'll group plants in the garden by their days, how long they're going to be there.
Okay.
So that you can group some of those, and the cole crops would be an example. Some of the early season crops you might plant, you can plant those together in the garden, because then you're going to harvest those first, and then that will give you an area then to replant later on, where you'll have a bigger area then that you can harvest most of those crops, the peas and the broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage. Although some of the cabbages have pretty long, they might be in the 75, 85 to 90 days to harvest. But especially, early onions that you're going to just harvest as bunching onions.
Well, beans are
lettuce,
a crop too.
Beans.
Beans you'll plant them now, and then you'll pick and replant in July.
So those crops where shorter days to harvest, that we can have successive crops in the garden. Grouping those together can help give you more space too, versus having one row of cabbage and then you switch to a shorter day crop and then a longer day crop as you go across.
Okay.
But you can do it that way. It can work. It just, you kind of have to think that out and plan that out and maybe draw it on paper. So you can look at it and study it and make sure that that system's going to function for you.
And ask Pythagoras, because the Pythagorean theorem, I'm sure, plays in here somewhere too. Okay, thank you for calling.
Well, thank you, too. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
You too.
You too.
All right, we're at 5 minutes away from the top of the hour.
Yeah, there's all kind of ways to do that, and
don't put the Japanese beetle trap right next to the grapevines.
No,
we
definitely
know
not.
Okay.
The grapevines are attractive enough to it, let alone putting the pheromones there that attract them anyhow.
Yeah.
So it just hones them in even more.
Yeah. Okay. All righty. So that was one of the things that I actually was thinking about as we're thinking about getting our garden ready to go too. It's really time to get those plants now, isn't it?
It'll most definitely.
Yeah. The weather's going to be good for it, as well. The nurseries and the greenhouses are going to start running out of plants.
Yes, that's the other key thing. There's a window there when they produce these, and then after that they tend not to, for a number of reasons. And that's why I think we tend to also maybe plant or try to plant our garden all at once. And in a lot of cases, we're not using, if we're not freezing or canning, if we're just using everything fresh, we don't need near the quantity at that, at all that one time. So you don't go out and plant 100 lettuce plants at one time, unless you have a big family to feed and
they're rabbits.
And right, or you're trying to feed
Which,
the friends.
even if you have a small family of rabbits, just wait a couple months and you'll have a big family of rabbits.
So with some of those types of crops, and especially those ones that can cycle in 45 or 50 days, and a lot of times those are seeded. So you can just seed plants, just seed enough to what you are going to use within a couple of weeks, and then go back in and seed some more.
Yeah.
It's about the only way you have to, and then you can kind of keep things going, and you'll always have those fresh produce there coming along in the process. And it takes timing, and it takes some effort to make that all happen and keep things going.
Like Danny Yarnick with his sweet corn, huh? You plant a batch, so they're going to come in on this particular week. He probably has it timed out that way, that this batch I'm planting here is going to be ready on this week. The batch I plant next week, the week after, he probably does it just like that.
Absolutely, because you want to have continual supply. Once you start the season, you want to have ample supply for people to purchase. So you have to plan that out, think that out, do the best that you can do. And, rain and cold and all that can mess up the best laid plans because it can all be factored out on paper, and then different varieties of corn have different days to maturity, and so you got to factor that in as well. Cold soils, things don't germinate as quickly as you might want them to, so that can delay when that plant comes up, and then, of course, then when it'll be able to be harvested.
And the farmer will say, if you do not germinate, then I will terminate.
Yeah.
Which is what we must do to this conversation because we're out of time. Good to see you again. Thanks for coming into the studio.
Likewise. Glad to be here. Likewise. Glad to be